So when I was a young guy, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a pilot when I grew up, but the very next thing I wanted to be was a missionary. And there's no sound reason for how that came to be, except that when I was 12 or 13, I had a incredible experience where the Lord showed me the cross, where I saw Jesus on the cross and saw his pain, and it marked the rest of my life. You could say that Paul says in Galatians 1 that he has become a bondservant to the gospel, basically because God knocked him off his horse that day and there was no going back for him. You could say that experience was the same for me. When I saw the cross, I knew that I wanted to be that. I wanted to live like that cross, and I needed the Holy Spirit's help to make that happen. But He drove me to a life that tries to look like that cross and that tells others about it.
Is this not my chosen? Is not all my emotion tied up?
Behold, I am slinging out the inhabitants of the land at this time, and will cause them distress, that they may be found. And Jeremiah responds, "Woe to me, because of my injury. My wound is incurable. But I said, truly this is a sickness, and I must bear it." And Jeremiah's words here are regarding the distress that's coming upon Israel. We've seen different distresses through history, and I believe there's a distress to come. But it's interesting that the Lord defines the distress as being a way that Israel may be found. And then Jeremiah responds with saying, I have to carry this grief the Lord has basically forced me to through calling my name. The journey for us in pursuing missions to Jews or Israelis was never something that we concocted in our minds. I think the journey of every missionary is not that you sign up to do a mission, it's that you're driven by the Lord in a divine way you're driven forward to do what He actually is asking you to do. You see something in His heart, and it drives you to go to the ends of the earth to fulfill that. And so with Israel, we were actually driven by the Lord. The Lord began to work in me and my wife an understanding of the Scriptures that drove us to the only option was sell your house, sell your things, and go and try to become a minister of the gospel to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And so we spent time in Israel. We spent time there trying to understand the issue of that God has with His people. And in doing that, we learned that the Lord was saying, don't be in Israel at this time. And so we had found out about the Israeli backpacking phenomenon, is kind of what it's commonly known as. There's books, documentaries written and made about it. I guess in the 70s, basically it became commonplace for IDF soldiers to finish their compulsory terms of service. They'd receive a stipend from the government, and then they would go on these world backpacking tours. During that time, one of the most popular destinations from then until now has become Kathmandu, Nepal. They'll arrive in a place like Nepal to backpack. It's cheap to live, and they're there soul searching. They have been driven out and flung out of the land, as the Lord said, and we really believe it's to be found. And so the Lord showed us this city of Kathmandu, Nepal, and said, live here. There's 30,000 Israelis that come through Nepal every year. So for us, that's 30,000 opportunities to speak the truth of the gospel, to call Israel back to their covenant, to their God. And so in Nepal, we have a unique situation because you have a 3% Christian population of Nepal. They estimate maybe 3 to 5%. But it is recognized as the largest and fastest growing church in the world right now, on par, I think, with Iran. And so you have this unique context of a lot of Israelis who aren't in Israel and who are at leisure in a place like Kathmandu, Nepal, and you also have the fastest growing Christian church in the world. Now that's a unique context to provide what we think is a window of mercy for the Lord to extend the gospel, to preach the gospel to Israelis. Most of these Israelis are very secular. They don't believe in the Bible. They don't believe in the God of Israel, which can be a heartbreaking thing when you consider the question, what is the gospel? And when every man has to not only answer that question, but find out what it means for him and how he should respond. Us being driven to this place and seeing the covenant people of God, like Paul says in Romans 9, that he has unending sorrow and continual grief for his people Israel, for his kinsmen according to the flesh, for ethnic Israel who's been blinded and hardened, for the sake of Gentiles receiving mercy, but also unto their fulfillment in the covenant. When you see the firstborn chosen of God in Kathmandu, and you see them literally worshiping idols, or in Hindu temples, or in Buddhist temples, practicing meditation, and you know that this is the chosen people of God, we've actually slowly begun to experience that same unending sorrow. And I like the way Jeremiah says it there. It's an incurable wound. And it's a wound that the Lord drove into our hearts. It's not something we went out to find. He drove this thing into our hearts so that we could become ministers of the gospel in order to fulfill his purpose at the end of the age. So we believe that the Lord has led us to start a business in Tamil, which is the backpacking district of Nepal. And that's twofold. It helps us become legitimate to the government, to where we're actually benefiting their economy. And it's an economy that really needs to receive benefit right now. And it also provides our long-term visa. It's just a visa that's continually renewed. So if we could start that business, the business is the catalyst to actually help us do what we're trying to do, which is to plant a church. Our goal is to plant a church that is a Gentile representation of humility towards the Jew. In a time when there's a lot of Gentile arrogance rearing up and attacking Israel or the Jewish person or their ethnicity, and you could say hatred of the Holy Covenant, we want to see a young generation of Christian Nepalis empowered in the truth of the gospel, which is God's covenant with Israel, trained become indigenous missionaries in their city to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. And so we were wanting to create a church that is a community and a training center that trains young people to do covenantal evangelism with the secular Israelis, calling them back to account of their covenant that Hashem made with them. And also these indigenous missionaries, of course, going to the villages in Nepal that are spread across mountains that really have not heard the gospel. And so that is the goal. The business makes us legal. The business gives us a visa to be there, but the purpose of the business is to serve this vision the Lord has given us to really become a catalyst for reaching these Israeli backpackers. The Lord said to us that phrase, give me a fish and I eat for a day. Teach me to fish and I eat for a lifetime. In the same way, if I'm an evangelist on the streets of Nepal, I'm one person. But with God growing a young Nepali generation of Christians in the gospel, to empower them with the truth of the gospel, to lay down their lives to death for the Jew first and also for the Gentile, it's like eating for a lifetime. We're empowering a generation to do in their own country. Nepalis doing ministry to Jews in Kathmandu, Nepal. It's really a crazy idea. But imagine a Hindu person on the streets of Tamil speaking to an Israeli backpacker and saying, I, 1 year ago, worshipped 330 million gods. And day out, I worshipped and made sacrifices to these idols. And today, I worship one God, the God of Israel, and He's your God. And Jesus is your Messiah. That's just an amazing thing to see such an idolatrous person proclaim the name of the God of Israel as their only God. And so we're excited to see that happen. The reason our family wanted to make this video is really because we do need help, and but we want people to help that are moved by a mission, or that are also provoked to give to a mission that is supporting a mission to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. I think in missions in general and missiology in general in our day and time, I love it. We all want to reach the unreached people groups, UPGs, and we're going all over the earth. But to kind of hone in on what Paul is saying in the Epistle to the Romans, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile, the gospel is the power of God to salvation for all who believe, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. We are trying to reclaim what the Apostle Paul was burning for in doing a mission that is to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. We feel that we've kind of lost that in modern day missions. And sometimes when you say missions to the Jews or to Israeli backpackers in Kathmandu, the question is a little baffling to people. But this is the journey the Lord's led us on. And so our family is trying to raise basically in the next several years, to remain legitimate to the government in Nepal. We have to move not just from the first $10,000 installment, it has to become $50,000 that is basically taken and put into the Nepali economy. That happens through the purchase of vehicles for your business, through the purchase of equipment, through the paying of salaries, but a total of $50,000 is basically what we need to do well in launching into Kathmandu. And so I would just ask anyone who cares about the gospel, anyone who has seen that, God does keep his covenant with Abraham, and Israel will be a light to the nations one day. And these stray sheep of the house of Israel that are worshiping idols in Kathmandu, Nepal, need to hear the gospel. Anyone that would consider that a worthy calling, I would love for you to sow into what God is doing there. Everything that is given will go into this business, but into building the church in Nepal, and in reaching the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's our goal and that's our vision, and by God's will, it will be done.